Hey, how are you?
I'm good, Brian. How are you?
Not too bad. I wanted to start off and ask you, the role that you're playing, like of Harold, seems to be quite, I think, different from other roles you've done in the past. In that he seems to be a character that really goes through this journey of knowing himself, and that by the time he comes back to Jersey, he's really a man on a mission. I'm just wondering, between David and Alan, what did they have envisaged for the character, and what did you bring to it? What kind of observations did you have as you were playing it?
I think that the vision was that he was someone who could, who might stand next to Dickie, and who you might see as capable of more than his circumstances were allowing him to be, and the tension that comes with that was somebody that has to ask, but for the color of my skin, what would I be? Or but for this arbitrary limitation, that's set on my life, what could I be? So I think that that was in there. And then I think that I thought a lot about like the way that the series was even structured, like the impetus for the series is that this mobster goes to a therapist, that he goes to a couch to understand himself better and to work his stuff out. So what that's going to require, I think, in performance, for that to be interesting as an audience, is like a psychologically interesting and rich and deep performance. And so anyway, I think that being the centerpiece of the show, any of those characters, not just Tony, but you should want to examine any of those characters in the world in that same way. You can send any of them to Malfi. So I wanted Harold. Said all that to say, I hope that I could create something as psychologically rich,
Yeah,
interesting, that somebody might be curious about Harold being in a therapist's office.
yeah. It's interesting because, like, I mean, not to, the only reason I say this is because I was watching. I don't know if you saw it, that documentary, Summer of Soul. But like, um, his costume completely changed when he came when he went away and came back. Like, it was really, I think it was really quite sharp in the difference. I'm wondering. I mean, were there any performances that you prior to this that you're kind of looking to draw upon, or anything that Alan and David want you to look at and kind of get a feel for?
Oh, you mean like other acting performances?
Yeah, like as in like something that I don't know, something like James Earl Jones or something like that, and any of those
Oh,
like kind of black exploitation films that he did or anything like that.
sure. That's a really good question. I didn't really, but I'm sure all that's in there. Like we're all like a product of all the images we've ever seen, the music we've heard. So I'm sure it's in there. I thought a lot about my grandfather. Linnell Linnell Odom was his name, and I thought a lot about if there was any image that I was really thinking about. It was him. It was the early pictures that I'd seen of him, and even who he was by the time I met him and got to know him in the 80s. There were remnants of that guy. Yeah, Harold reminded me a lot of my granddad.
Can I ask? I mean, what was Linnell like? What did he do? Like, was he from Jersey? Was he from Queens? Like, where was he? Like,
Yeah. Well, like Harold, he came from the South. So he immigrated to the North from the South to make a better life for himself and his family. And I really just kind of thought of the two of them as like, they just took two different paths, but for very similar reasons. My grandfather just went about it in more, I don't know, in like the legitimate way, in
yeah,
quotes,
sure,
and
yeah, obviously, yeah,
Harold chooses the illegitimate way, in quotes.
yeah,
So, but that it's, underneath, it's the same desire to put food on the table for their children, to live a life that is to walk a little taller than the men they saw in generations before them, to provide a little more comfort for the people that they loved.
Yeah, because that scene like that you have with Frank Lucas, like the character of obviously the real life character Frank Lucas, like it's very potent. Like it's really kind of, I mean, what I felt about Harold the character was that he was, the idea of upward mobility, that he wanted, as you say, wanted to move beyond what society had expected of him.
Yeah.
Was, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, there is that thing with Italian Americans that, and Irish Americans have this as well, that they're just kind of seen in that sort of viewpoint. Was that a consideration for you? Was there any kind of considerations in it, as in playing like a black character, but a character who's a criminal? I mean, he is a criminal, like.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that they're all criminals, and
They're not redeemable, like.
yeah, they're all criminals. That's the world that David's writing about. But he's writing about it, in a way that feels honest, in a way that feels somehow fresh too. And I thought, when it comes to the violence, what I did hope that I could bring to it was like, someone asked me what the hardest part about playing Harold was, and for me it was really dealing with that violence honestly, because I think that I didn't imagine that Harold was some maniac, some person who relished in taking human life, or even in risking his life every day. I didn't think of him in that way. And so whenever he does make these decisions to do violent things, that somewhere in him I wanted to deal with what that costs. I thought that that's like the least I could do as an actor, as a father, was to, if I'm going to use myself to do these violent things, that I would like try anyway to deal with what that costs, and not sort of like that kind of thing.
Yeah, try to be honest about it. Yeah, and it definitely shows in the performance, I think. Okay, I'm getting the wrap there, so I'll leave it at that. That was great, man. Thanks.
Yeah, man. Be well.
As far as your nephew goes,
I'm listening.
stay out of his life.